Hello, I'm Nina Stoyan Rosenzweig from the University of Florida, and I am here today, June 23rd, 2021, interviewing Meg Magnan. Ms. Magnan, could you tell me when and where you were born?
1945 in Decatur, Indiana.
Okay, and did your family live in the city, suburbs, country? What was your family?
It's a small town,
Okay,
and we lived right in the middle of town.
okay. Did you have any siblings?
2 older sisters, one 5 years older than me, and one 3 years older than me, and a brother 5 years younger than me.
Okay, nice. And what did your parents do?
My father ran a lumber yard and built homes. He built our house, the house I lived in when I was born, and then he built a newer house about 8 years later. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom. He didn't want her to work. If she could have worked, she would have probably made us a lot of money, because she was a wonderful piano player.
Oh, what kind of music did she perform?
Oh, she got a degree in classical music and organ. She played the organ at church for years. And she knew all the 20s and could play anything by ear.
Wonderful. Did she teach your siblings and yourself music, or was that something?
She didn't try that. That wouldn't have worked. She got us to go to lessons, but we didn't practice. We didn't want to do it.
Okay. It's hard sometimes to have that motivation, the kind of thing that then maybe I know that I wish that I had practiced when I was young.
I know, we know better now, but she was so talented that most kids, you give them money if they practice. Her grandfather gave her money if she stopped practicing.
Wow.
When she was 12, she played for the silent movies. So she could do things like that, which we didn't appreciate.
When you were young. That is wonderful. So she'd play in like the movie theaters and the organ that would come up.
Yes, and play at church. And
wonderful. Well, so can you tell me about your experience with coming down with polio? How old were you when you got it?
I was 3.5. My mother wrote something. So I have some, it's in the back of here. Here's my baby book. On August 20th, 1949. During the next week, you were listless and fussy. Daddy took you to Dr. Zwick on Wednesday evening, but he could not find anything but a slight case of tonsillitis. There's been a lot of polio going around. We were relieved that you were all right. Thursday and Friday, you ran and played as usual, but on Saturday, you were cross and nothing was right. That afternoon, you went to bed and slept for 2 hours. Your temperature was 101, and there it stayed. The doctor said to give you penicillin, but you still had 101. Sunday, Monday, the doctor came and said, I'm afraid we do have a case of polio here. And I was taken to the Fort Wayne hospital for 12 days. And then I got to go home for intensive treatments at home, which is pretty impressive. A lot of kids got stuck in the hospital for 6 months.
That's true. I've certainly heard of that in some cases where they were just put on the polio ward and had limited visiting rights. So And I've certainly spoken to people who got polio when they were young and they don't remember the details of it, which is understandable. And it's great that your mother kept that record so
I
that you had
know.
that information. Uh, how severely were you affected by polio then?
My back, my neck, both legs were totally paralyzed. Well, I don't know totally, were paralyzed.
Mhm.
My left leg more than anything else.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything else in here about that.
About the details.
I was a model patient. I seldom cried, but I said my legs hurt. I was stiff and Daddy carried you out on pillows out of the hospital. Oh, my father, when they got me home, my father went door to door in our town of 8,000, knocked on every door to find a retired nurse who would come and give me the Sister Kenny treatment,
Mhm.
which, as I understand it, is the hot packs.
Mhm.
4 times a day or something. I can remember the smell. I can't remember the treatments.
Mhm.
I know where they did it, on the big table in the dining room. But she came for 9 months, I think, doing that,
Mhm. Well,
hoping to get some back.
so he did find someone who could do the treatments.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, there's some things that went right.
Mm-hmm.
We called her Aunt Mary.
And it's interesting that you mentioned you remember the smell because basically it was wool blankets
Wool blankets.
that were submerged in really hot water and then wrapped around your legs. And it seems like that smell was pretty pervasive. I've spoken with other people who remember the smell. Very distinctive. And I guess our smell memory is pretty vivid.
And my left leg was more severely affected.
Mhm. Okay. So you had the treatments for 9 months. Then, did you have any other type of rehabilitation?
My father built some toys that he thought would help me regain strength, but I don't think I used them. I don't remember them. I don't know what they were.
Mm-hmm.
Something to make me use my left leg, probably, but yeah, I just heard stories about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
No other rehab, no. Well, I got a left leg brace and just saw the doctor every year. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Got a new brace as I grew.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like then you never had bulbar polio, which is probably why they could send you home after
Yeah.
just 12 days. And it sounds like you regained the ability to sit up and use your right leg.
Yes. Yes. By the end of the 9 months or so, I was walking with 2 crutches and the full left leg brace.
Mhm.
I had enough balance and upper body strength to do that. And something else I was going to say. I lost my train of thought. So, oh, I know. And I had a tricycle. And if I rode the tricycle uptown, which was 3 blocks away, we'd reach the ice cream store and I could get some ice cream. So, they were trying to motivate me and
Mm-hmm.
did a lot of things right.
Mm-hmm. And that sounds like they really were on top of a lot of things that were important for recovering from polio. Kind of.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And with 2 older sisters, if they were going to play outside and maybe go for a walk, they'd pull me in the wagon. And later, if they were playing softball in the lot next door, they would run for me. I would hit the ball, but they would run for me. So they tried to include me.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways they didn't understand that they weren't including me and being helpful, but overall, it could have been worse.
Overall, they were trying.
They were trying. There was a positive feeling towards me. I was part of the family. Yeah.
And it sounds like they kind of wanted for you to be part of what they were doing.
Yeah, and when I first got polio, they did feel very, very guilty. I mean, like every other family in town, they were being so careful to keep us home. It was August. Yeah, it was hot. We had to stay home. And I think the way I caught it was the next door neighbor was a nurse. So she was clearly exposed out at the hospital at some point. And she brought it home, and her oldest daughter got it, but not very much. And I think I had a tea party with her that day, and then my sisters didn't go over that day. Although there's another theory, I really think that it was so contagious. I think that most kids got it, but it didn't cross. It was like a flu. It didn't cross the spinal barrier. It got into everybody's respiratory, crossed into the bloodstream, but it had to get into the spinal area to cause paralysis. Yes. For some reason, I couldn't fight it.
So your sisters, and I think sometimes people might not even show symptoms, but they still might have had it. So
I believe that's true now. They didn't think that then and wondered why I got it, but I think we all did.
You all were probably exposed but you were the one who showed those symptoms.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that there were ways in which your sisters wanted to include you, but it wasn't always helpful. Do you remember anything specific about that?
Oh, specific. No, I think later on, emotionally, more, and my family never talked about it. Well, we never talked about anything. We were to be seen and not heard. So, but I think in grade school, it wasn't as obvious how much I was struggling with it emotionally. Let's see if there's anything else that they did. No, but grade school, I think my family did a pretty good job of just having me be part of things, like we said. And most of the time, if I didn't have my brace on, I would crawl in the house. And I would just see how fast I could crawl and if I could beat my brother to the kitchen, which, as I think about it, that's pretty much putting myself into this, not hiding anything, but showing them what I could do. School, kindergarten and first grade were on ground level. So I had no trouble getting in, and home was 2 blocks away. But in second grade, I think that was the next major development. Since my left leg wasn't getting stronger, they decided they'd take my brace, not have me use my brace, to see if I would use my left leg. Well, I couldn't use my left leg. It had no way to stay locked. And I don't think they knew how hard that year was for me. They got me special shoes, alligator shoes. I had 2 crutches, my right leg that was strong, my left leg that was totally weak. And somehow every day I got up the 6 to 8 big steps outside the school and 17 more stairs up to the 2nd floor. Every day using my right leg first, most likely, hanging on, holding my extra crutch. I don't know how I did it. I have visions of it. I know I hated it. And in today's world, somebody would have talked about it. Somebody would be talking about it to figure out how to get me up those stairs safely. I don't know why I didn't fall over backwards. But it's sort of like the horror of going to school. It's okay, now I got to get up these steps, and I would count them, but I can't quite remember how many there were. And then get up those stairs. Yeah, I was like 8 years old and probably weighed 50 pounds. Somebody could have carried me. Somebody could have walked behind me. Somebody could have held my crutch. But I got my brace back sometime, maybe by third grade. And then I was a little bit steadier, but from third grade through seventh grade, I had to do those stairs. Plus, by sixth and seventh grade, I had 2 more flights. I don't know how I did it. And of course, nobody noticed or talked about it. Oh, in gym class, my mom and the gym teacher would run into each other at the grocery store and compare notes. Do you think Margaret should play gym this year or just sit out? And they would decide for me and tell me what to do. And more than a year here and there, I would just sit and watch. I'd go to the gym, change into my gym clothes, and sit and watch. Overall, I became a watcher rather than an active participant. Second grade sticks out because they took my brace. I got alligator shoes, but I lost a lot of mobility.
So having the brace really did help you move, and it was
Yeah, it helped me stabilize. Yeah, I could put weight on my left leg when I used my right leg to go to the next step.
Rather than just leaning on your crutches, on your arms.
Exactly.
And I'm just curious, during that time, you said no one asked you anything about how you were doing?
No. I think my parents thought if they just treated me like everybody else, that I'd figure out the rest of it. And I mean, families didn't talk they didn't talk about feelings and emotions and challenges, but they did talk to each other about what they did today and where they went, and who they saw. My family didn't even do that. We'd sit down at dinner and Mom would say to Dad, "How was work today?" He'd say, "Okay." Then we'd eat and we'd all run. We're very uncomfortable. And for me, with such a big emotional, I'm not sure when, but I would say by the time I was 8, I would cry myself to sleep every night and say, what did that little 3-year-old do that was so bad? Why has she been punished? So I used the only system I knew, which was our weekly church, to try to understand polio, when it didn't have anything to do with God. But that's all I had to go on. And that certainly affected my faith for my whole life.
In what way?
Feeling alone, feeling like I have to figure it all out. Not having a strong belief. My husband has a strong belief. And he says all day long, he'll say, "Thank you, Jesus. I need strength for this. Just follow me, help me today." And I don't have anybody to talk to. There wasn't anybody there.
No one was responding.
Nobody said a thing about it. And I think I saw it as a punishment. By middle school, I was seeing it. We didn't really have middle school. We went to 8th grade at high school. I think what I did with it was I looked ahead. I said, let's see, I think 6th grade, up to 6th grade, I was still pretty solid on a lot of emotional growth issues. I was still crying at night and wondering what I did for such a punishment. But I did get invited to parties and I was very successful academically. And I was still talking. And saying hi to people and getting to know people. But 7th grade, I noticed Nancy was one of the really popular girls, and her legs started to get shapely. And I said, oh, my right leg sort of is. Let's see what happens. This will happen. And it didn't happen. And I can't really remember exactly when all those pressures hit, but the pressure of discovering your body and you're being judged by your body hits pretty hard in 7th grade, 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I developed an attitude that, oh, it'll get better. It'll get better next time. In high school, I didn't see anybody wearing a brace or using crutches. I figured mine would be gone. That's the degree to which I did not understand polio and needed to talk to somebody and be prepared. And I wasn't. I wasn't for years. And at the end of high school, I said, oh, college will be different. And I found myself as we moved here 5 years ago, that here in Florida would be different because we'd be coming into a community of retirees and they'd want to know all the things I have learned about disability, but know that. So I realized how much I was hoping that it would just go away. I think my parents gave me that one, that I would somehow be able to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So where was I in 8th grade?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let me see if well, 8th grade, unfortunately, our father died. And I kind of can't begin to separate, but I know that nobody talked to us about that either. And my oldest sister had just left for college, so it was just Mary and Mom and John and I. So right away, the family was really cut into a smaller support system. And then my mother, of course, was devastated. So I sort of lost both parents, and it was 8th grade. Holy smokes. I stopped talking. Marilyn was one of my friends, and alphabetically, her name was before mine. So she was always sitting in front of me almost in every single class. And I physically hid got down behind Marilyn anytime the teacher asked a question. And I just said I didn't know anybody else who had a disability and didn't have a father. So a great degree of long isolation, and I just studied all the time and excelled. Yeah, I feel like as long as I got straight A's, nobody ever talked to me about anything because that's how you were evaluated. And I was seen as successful. So I feel like I probably skipped a few things, but those are the key things that really I had to tackle once I was on my own in college. Yeah. There was something else that was written here. I just began to really doubt myself. Oh, I started to feel like I was dumb, which is crazy. I was one of the smartest kids in the class. Dumb and stupid. Why would you have two words very much the same? Dumb, stupid, fat, and ugly. I've never been fat and I'm not ugly. But I don't know, I have to say by my teen years, those were my descriptors of myself. And nobody said anything. So shall we move on past that one?
Well, I'm curious, we had talked a little bit earlier about music. Did you have anything that you did outside of school, like music, or any interests or passions?
Not that I was able to understand at the time. I didn't know who I was. My oldest, the best teacher in our small school was the science teacher.
Mhm.
So my oldest sister got a chemistry degree.
Mhm.
And then along came Mary, who was very shy. And I mean, my older sisters never got talked to either, but they didn't have this disability hanging on them.
Mhm.
But Mary got a degree in chemistry. So I went to IU and got a degree in chemistry. I mean, it's been helpful in some ways, but it certainly wasn't my passion.
Mhm.
No, it took my 20s to find my passion, and it did lead me to disability rights.
Mhm. So I guess we can talk about college then. You went to IU in Bloomington?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And
And I thought it would be different.
and it wasn't, or
There was one phone call. I wish I could remember. There were 6 of us in one area of the dorm. And we were in a special program, advanced English.
Mhm.
And there were the girls and the boys, and they were separate. And all the girls were out one day except me, and one of the boys called and asked for Linda. No, Linda's not here. Kathy, no, Kathy's not here.
Mhm.
I went through and then finally said to me, well, tell them there's a party on Friday and we hope they can come. Now, I'm sure if somebody with more emotional power would have said, sure, and I'll plan on being there too. But
Mhm.
I took it as total rejection. And I forget your question.
It wasn't
So,
very specific. It was just more kind of
no,
what
it
you
hit
were like.
me. It hit me right away. I couldn't handle it. I saw it. I don't know what he really said. He might have said that, but now I didn't have any choice except to see it as rejection.
Mhm.
So I studied as Phi Beta Kappa by junior year. I forget what I graduated with high extinction. Extinction. What's the word I'm looking for?
Distinction.
Distinction.
Mhm.
That happens more and more. I keep telling myself to remember how old I am. But I can still remember any of this. I studied. I said someday there'll be somebody. But because of the work that I did do, I had an incredible record. And there was a teaching program that was looking for a variety of people from throughout the United States. And here's this Indiana girl who's so smart. And I was picked to go to a program at Harvard for 2 years, which took me to Boston.
Mhm.
Thank God, finally a place where people are different. And I had no idea that people could be so different and think so differently and act and make different choices. And of course, it was women's consciousness raising in
Mhm.
those groups. And I was lucky to find a disability group
Mhm.
and start to fight my way back.
Wow. So what did you do that after you finished undergraduate, or was that in the middle of your undergraduate career?
After undergraduate, that was the master's degree.
Okay. So I'm just curious, how were people in Boston different?
I think we all can feel people's judgments of us. When you meet somebody, you kind of know, oh, they've already decided I'm not somebody they want to get to know better, or oh, they're being super polite, like
Mhm.
my church people and the Presbyterians in Indiana. These people were, well, it's also these wonderful years called the 60s,
Mhm.
where people were interested in being together and sharing, and it's certainly not the world that we have now.
Mhm.
People were different, maybe more because of Indiana 60s didn't really happen like Boston
Mhm.
and California. It was a different environment. people didn't immediately look down at my leg and see a brace and say, oh, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get something I left in the other room, and never come back. They just treated me like a person. They talked to me. I was getting my voice back. I was able to try to figure out what I was interested in doing. I mean, who was I anyway? That's what I did. I remember I moved in with a group of people in a group house. And Walter was this kind of person. I'd look, now, what does Walter, how does Walter decide what does he mean by what he said? And, oh, I can't remember their name, but the different people I lived with, like 6 or 7 of them, I just watched them. I had to watch. I didn't know. I had to figure out where I'd been hiding for 10 years, 20 years. And there was one woman from New York. She was looking at me, trying to figure out who in the world is this person. She's not from the Bronx. She's not a Jew. She's not a Puerto Rican. She's a what? Small town Indiana Presbyterian. She didn't have a place to put me in her hierarchy. So, but everybody was into it, you know. It's just a nice time to be around. And I didn't think about my future in terms of a career. I guess, well, I almost dropped out of that chemistry program in junior year, but then I didn't. I sort of knew, oops, this was a mistake. But in Boston, I was part of the women's consciousness raising, and then there was this disabled man who used the same model with disabled people. And I went to a couple of those groups, and one of the first questions is, tell us what happened to you. And I guess I was able to do that because I felt safe. Eventually, I led some of those groups myself and helped start an advocacy center for disabled people. And then what I did was there were probably 15 disability rights groups of different sorts, and the broke rehab and the transportation advocacy person and the housing person. And I just went and volunteered at each place to see where I might fit. And I got a job at UMass Boston Disabled Student Center for 2 years, which was great. Oh, there was a White House conference on handicapped individuals in 1977, and I got to go to that. And I'd just wander around. I'd sit down at a table of 6 or 8 people and say, tell me all about you. Where are you from? I mean, I was initiating onto my life. I'd never done that. I'd been in hiding. And I couldn't do it except with the disabled group. I've never transferred that skill to non-disabled. There's just a lack of safety. Too late now. I still thought it would be different when we got here, but no, there's still something I can't get over. And I'm not interested anymore. I just want to stay home and eat and watch TV.
Okay. So then you got very involved. You said was all this happening in Boston then? You stayed in
It was all over the country.
Okay.
Well, big cities.
So you traveled all over the country then?
No, I stayed mostly in Boston, except for some conferences and a 504 project.
Okay.
The new law and regulations.
And you mentioned that you volunteered at the different groups and you got a job at one of them for 2 years.
Oh, I worked there for 2 years, and then I went to work for the Boston Self-Help Center, which is Well, it was just the next step in being organized. I liked advocacy better than counseling,
Mhm.
but I did lead some groups where we just, I guess in retrospect, it's pretty remarkable that for every person that was in most all of the counseling groups, they had never told their story. Like I'm telling my story here today.
Mhm.
So it was pretty universal that you just don't talk about disability,
Mhm.
but you know it's bad.
Mhm.
You don't know what you did. You think it'll go away.
Mhm. You don't know why it happened to you.
No. I forgot to mention about dating.
Okay.
Well, there's nothing to say. I didn't.
Mhm.
I think seventh grade, I was hanging on to being a popular girl and having some boys interested, but eighth grade, that really, you start to really figure out who you're good enough for, who you're not good enough for. And my father's death just knocked me flat. So all along here, I was also struggling with trying to figure out who I would be. Well, I felt if I could just find somebody who was even a little bit better than me, then they would make up for me. That's how I quantified it. And I did find somebody junior year of college or senior year, and we got engaged. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I just wanted somebody. I just wanted to get married. Get married, please get married. Let's get married.
Mhm.
And I wound up breaking off the engagement and dating somebody else, but that didn't work. And then I went through, I don't know, years of different little, at that time I had quite a large group of just these 60s friends to hang out with, but I wanted to get married. And at one point I finally said, I'm not going to date anybody unless they're disabled. So I saw I could tell that was a huge barrier. And then I realized this man in our organization who was blind was actually looking pretty interested. And we did get married 32 years ago.
Oh. And what year was that? Well, 32 years ago. I guess I could figure it out if I were quick enough with the math.
1989.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And where some people had just spent 20 years developing their career, I had spent 20 years, I've got to get married. I've got to get married. I've got to get married. I've got to have a child. And I did have one before I met Tom. And then we had a little boy, Harold. And unfortunately, he has some autism and we had to struggle. But we also knew we understood disability much better than most people.
Mhm. So
All
you were
right.
better equipped to work with him and
Yeah. And especially now, he's still in Indiana and we talk to him every day and he's working full time. And we know we made that happen. And it's a pretty fragile balance.
Mhm. But one that you were obviously able to negotiate for him.
We did. We did what we thought was going to work. So far, so good.
And how old is he now?
He's 31.
Mhm. So at some point then did you go back to Indiana or did you stay in
Oh,
Boston?
yes, we did. I did. That's right. We got married in Boston. Sam was born in Boston. And then Tom's vision was affecting his work. And he said he had to quit.
Mhm.
And we had bought a condo. We had a pretty high mortgage. And my mother was very sick with cancer. And my father-in-law said, well, come and live with me. I said, I'll never go back to Decatur because I knew what I felt like in Decatur. I knew what I felt like in Boston. And we didn't have choices. I think we had $700 to our name and carrying it around in a paper bag from a goodbye party. Got in our car and drove to Decatur, and we were there for 23 years. And I didn't have close friends, but I knew a lot of people. And I did start genealogy, which I've done for 30 years and loved it. And it's nice to be where you grew up to do genealogy. And then I did 17 years of GED program. And some combination of everything I'd been through made me so accepting of them that I was their favorite teacher that they never had. There's the first person that I'm sure that said, good try, why don't you take a break? Rather than say, hey, get that job done, you didn't finish your paper. And it's remarkable that students, that was a remarkable experience for me. So those two things made Indiana worth it. Yeah, I know 250 people that got their GEDs through me, and there's probably another 100 that dropped out but did finish later on. So I just didn't have it. I just looked at these great kids and said, what did you do that got you kicked out? Write me an essay about how to get kicked out of 7th grade. So it was really fun, and it was very, of course, writing an essay was traumatic for most of them. So this one student, I said, would you write me an essay today? And he said, and I said, write an essay about whether marijuana should be legalized or not. He said, whoa. And then everybody started writing essays. And all I had to do was, write something like that that's interesting, that they know about. So that phase of Indiana, I really figured out who I was and not exactly where I fit. I'm still wanting a disability organization to be part of. But this is a very small town. This is about a town of 1,500. So I digress there, but it's nice to see that Decatur gave me those wonderful, wonderful times.
A real sense of accomplishment. And
yeah, and knowing who I am.
Do you think it had changed in between the time that you left and when you came back? Or do you think you had changed? Or?
No, it was all me changed. I mean, I had a very nice house still, and everybody knew me and respected how smart I was. And there's some people that have written about their polio, and people actually threw things at them and knocked them down and stole their crutches, and they never did anything mean to me. So, but they also didn't know exactly how to include me. And then now I had a blind husband. So disability-wise, there was still a barrier, but I was busy with the GED and with Sam, and our daughter was very, very successful, still is. So and I still had this thought that it would get better, that somehow the women's church activities, well, of course I could do that. I can bake a cake when this woman, then I can bring some food. Is I wouldn't get called for something. I wouldn't get asked for the funeral home. Would you bring a green salad or something? And well, why didn't they ask me? And then they'd say in church, we don't have enough people bringing stuff. Well, I think I asked one of them, and she said, well, we thought you were too busy. When are you going to find out who I am and ask me and treat me the same? And then it never happened. So I do think I create some of that barrier, but there's a woman with polio here in town, and I'm going to talk to her about you and
Oh,
you
great.
about her.
Oh,
But
wonderful.
she acts differently. I can see she doesn't have any of those barriers. And she's very well known in the community and active in a lot of things. And I look at her and I say, okay, what did she learn? Well, she didn't learn to hide like I did.
Mhm.
Oh, the post-polio stuff is coming up too.
Okay. Mhm. Hmm. Well, I'm curious. I have a question. You were talking about how in the various and different advocacy, disability rights groups, people were telling their story for the first time. How did that feel?
For me,
Mhm.
listening, I was a pretty good listener. And I was always amazed that that had been part of their life too. Just not, oh, there was somebody named Ken when I was 24 in Boston. I was in the Park Station, downtown Boston. And he came up to me and he said, my name's Ken and I'm a doctor and I notice you have a different gait, a way of walking. I was like, oh yeah. But he's very nice and I was lonely enough to give it a chance. And I did wind up meeting with him for a number of times. And he listened and listened and listened to my story so much. And he had just gotten married and he said, if I hadn't just gotten married, who knows what might have happened. So he had some opening there in his experience to reach out to me. And he was a photographer. So he said, well, let's go take some pictures of you. I said, no pictures. Well, no, that's not what I said. I said, as long as they only show the face. And he said, well, let's do an experiment. So we went out and he took like 10 pictures of my face and then 10 more of my whole body. And my face immediately went, like crazy. And he took a couple more and kept trying to get me relaxed. And then there were pictures of me without my brace, with my legs, and I had on a happy face. And I still have those pictures, of course.
Mhm.
So there were things like that happened that were very good, that were very helpful.
Mhm.
So I could listen to other people's stories too
Mhm.
and hope it helped. It seemed to help. People came back.
Mhm. Well, it sounds a little bit like that's what you did with when you're working with the students getting their GEDs, that you were the one who was kind of listening to their unique story and that
Yeah.
made a difference for them.
Yeah, I could listen without judgment.
Mhm. Hmm.
And the students that now they have to have an IEP and have everything approved, I would just, if they were having a hard time, I'd just say, go take a break. You can work for 15 minutes and you can have a break. So
Being able to listen to them and figure out what they needed really seemed to be important. So I know we had said an hour, so we should probably, and it's 10:50, talk about post polio. Did you experience post polio syndrome? Or are you experiencing it now?
yes and yes. And I didn't know what it was. So back to all that again. Here we go again. What does polio do? What's happening to me? It was at it started in 76 or 78 when I was doing the work at the university and then at Boston Self-Help Center, that I would just be unbelievably tired. And for about 3 weeks, and they'd say it was a flu. Does it sound like polio?
Mhm.
Their reaction was they sent me to the psychiatrist and had me join the group called What's the Gain of Pretending to be Sick. They did a lot of tests, couldn't find anything wrong. And then I think it was in 81 that it first got talked about in a Time magazine or Newsweek magazine article. And the woman I had just been working with at the university called me up and said, listen to this. And she read what they were reporting about post-polio. And I called her up. I called up the woman that was in the article. And she was a doctor. And we talked for a half hour. And she said, yeah, that's post-polio. So I knew pretty much ahead of. But I just had to cut back. There was 1 year I just stayed in bed most of the year. I was just too tired. I don't know, was I also depressed? Sure. Does it make it worse? Was it amplified because I was unhappy? I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Could
But I
certainly.
still figured out, and I kept enough in touch with people and wound up having the first child in a relationship that didn't last, and then meeting Tom. And the post-polio is mainly fatigue and pain. If I overdid, it was very painful. And I had to move to the wheelchair. Starting to use a wheelchair is a major issue.
Mhm.
And I just had a very long day at work planned, and somebody left a manual wheelchair. And I used it all day, and I felt great at 9 o'clock. I said, this wheelchair is my friend, not my enemy.
Mhm.
And I'm in a motorized wheelchair. I think this is about my 5th one.
Mhm.
So I've been using the wheelchair. Didn't think about it. It's just a part of me. But like the other things with polio, when I meet new people here, they do notice the wheelchair. This wheelchair is more a definition of me than my name. So I need to juggle that. But
Is that the phone? Do you need to get the phone? Or?
no, she'll stop. It's a little distracting. Yeah, that's better. The polio's been very hard, the post-polio, giving up my bicycle that I had made, especially for me with 20 speeds, and my right leg hurting, and my upper body strength is much less. My attention span's almost, but I'm 75, so what do you expect? I like to figure out exactly what's happening to me, and age has got to be part of it.
Mhm.
But I did stop working. I was just too tired just before we moved here.
Mhm.
And just recently, my good leg's been giving out. And I've not come to terms with that yet, because now I can't do a step even with help. There's a whole lot of people's houses I can't go to.
Mhm.
And I can't stand and do the laundry. So Tom gets to do the laundry now, in addition to the cooking and the cleaning. He's wonderful. The big fear, if anything happens to him, I can't live independently at this point. What do I go to a nursery home? I can't deal with it. So I've got some new challenges. I don't know how I'll figure them out. I could walk a few steps across the room. I can't. My right leg gives out. I can't walk. I can't do steps. I can't cook. I can't clean. I can't. We make a lot of jokes to deal with it. But I'm pretty scared because my brother died. My other sister's older than me and kind of losing it and lives on the second floor. And, I think of all the different people I know and, oh, she's on the second floor. My daughter's in California with 2 kids. I can't, I don't see a way I can get to, I can't. That's as far as I get. I can't, but I've been there before. I'll have to figure it out.
And I know that you will. And I'm curious, what made you decide to move to Florida?
That was all Tom. Tom wanted us to move to Indiana because there was a house that was rent free and he had no job left and I hadn't really developed much of a career. I was really busy with fatigue and Sam and keeping Josie going. So his best friend from high school lives here. His best friend from high school now is our driver for medical. All medical is in Tallahassee, which is over an hour away. I can't drive that far anymore. And the lift's not quite working on the van. But we have enough money and we can walk to the grocery store and and that's how we joke about it. But Tim lives here and he's backed us up on everything that we need. And they're best friends and they get together every Sunday. And so we're here and it's as good a place as any, I think. It's warm, maybe too warm, but
I know that sensitivity to cold is one issue for post-polio, so I know that some folks have moved to Florida to get away from the cold.
Absolutely.
And the icy sidewalks and things.
Every bit of that. I hated the Indiana winters or the Boston winters. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Well, and I'm curious, I found you through a listing with the post-polio support group.
Yeah.
Do you have a group of folks in your area?
The support group I led was in Indiana for 15 years. And I can contact a couple of them and see, would you want to interview them or you're targeting Florida people?
Florida primarily, but I'd be happy to interview them as well.
Okay.
I just think it's important to kind of record these experiences and have your stories told. We forget so quickly the impact of infectious diseases, even COVID. Maybe I'm pessimistic about it, but I'm pretty sure we will run to forget what life was like with COVID. And it seems to me that we've pretty quickly forgotten what life was like with polio as an active threat. And I really think that the world needs to remember.
Yeah. Yeah, these are some of the issues that I haven't thought about for a long time. And they're still with me when I go walk out the door. But, I was fighting for a lot of years to get what I wanted. I wanted children and family and a husband, and I got those things. And now I've got old age and shaky stuff. And I have been diagnosed with Parkinson's, which, as I understand it, I haven't done the reading, but it's all the lack of dopamine and the polio. I had one doctor here say, anybody who had polio will get Parkinson's eventually. I said, oh, I know they're common, they're neurological and lower brain. hadn't heard that. So, okay, add it to my list. I'm 75. And it limits what I'm willing to go try to do in the community.
Mhm. Mm.
So where did that come from? I don't know.
But certainly thinking about what influences polio has had on your life.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too, I know we're a little bit over the hour that we discussed before, but I am curious, when you talked about advocacy, what kind of things were you advocating for?
Oh, my favorite thing that I did, there was a TGI Fridays restaurant that had just opened in Boston. And to get in, you had to go down to 6 steps and over here. And in here, there was a curving staircase to get to the bathroom. And I was there with my friend who had lost a hand, but otherwise was able-bodied.
Mhm.
And we went and talked to the manager, what about the disability architectural barriers code? He said, don't worry about it. Bring your friends. We'll carry them in. I said, okay. And I went back 2 weeks later with 13 people in wheelchairs and 40 other disabled people. And they were completely overwhelmed and just let us all sit out there on the sidewalk for about 2 hours while they called headquarters. And then they brought our food out.
Mhm.
And then later we found out they had had their plans all approved right before the disability advocacy the architectural barriers was passed. They were exempt. Stuff like that.
Mhm.
That's my favorite.
Mhm.
And I had access to that many disabled people.
Mhm. Well, if you were, one of the things that I do is teach medical students. I'm not a clinician, I'm not a physician, but I teach through medical humanities, working with history of medicine and narrative medicine. If you were to have a message or something that you would want medical students to know, what would that be that could help them become better doctors?
Good question. I'm not coming up with a quick answer.
Okay. Well, I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know that this is one of the things that I think is important to include it more in the medical school curriculum is just working with people with disabilities, because doctors are very much coming at it from the attitude of you have to fix what's wrong with people. And
The medical model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that they tend to rate the quality of life for people with disabilities as being lower than what people with disabilities rate their own quality of life.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. The medical model rather than the social integration model.
Hmm.
That if the world was set up better for me, I could do more. I could be more involved. I could do the steps. Things would be accessible. I wouldn't be judged by my wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or people might see it, recognize that it's a symbol of freedom and not of confinement.
Yes. Yes. And my wheelchair is my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And attitudes, how critical it is to have. Well, how can you say good attitudes about something that you're taught it is a negative?
Mm-hmm.
Turn that around somehow. Let's see, I still have that negative pull.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they're going to do that. I haven't figured out how to get individuals to change towards me. But that's the same thing for the medical students.
Mm-hmm. So to have them think more about the social model and not to jump to the negative.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And one thing that is, there was a teacher of the architecture that taught disability stuff and said, okay, let's design a new building and then do it so it's all accessible. And they all did really good projects. 6 months later, the same teacher said, yeah, draw a new building for me. What would you, emphasize in today's world? What are people looking for? And they threw all the steps back in there. They hadn't learned a thing. People like those steps. They make the room different,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's hard, very hard for me to figure out what you can do,
Mhm.
because I think I've got it figured out and then I'll hit another roadblock. And at this point, I'm just letting Tom take care of it. If my voice if I get too nervous, my voice really squeaks. I sound like a witch. So I don't know what to do about that yet. Just stay home and watch TV. Yeah. I'm trying to remember, there was a book in 1976, Bill Roth wrote a book. What was it called? It was about the attitudes. It was one of the first things I saw.
Is there anything else that you would want to say that we haven't covered that you think is important?
I think we hit a lot. No, I think there's very good questions. Those are exactly like key things that affected me then, for similar but differently, and challenges. And no, I think you're on the right track with medical students, for sure.
Okay, great. Well,
So I'll send some information to Vicky from Fort Wayne, Katie from Fort Wayne. I might not be able to reach 2 others. And here in Florida, Tamara and Hal Allen.
Okay.
And hopefully they'll contact you.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. And thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciated your honesty and your willingness to tell your story. It's really important and really valuable. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you too. Yeah.
Right. So I will be in touch. If at some point I have medical students, it wouldn't be this long, but they would certainly be interested, I think, in hearing more about your experience with post-polio, but just in particular, how you would want a medical student to treat you if you were their patient. Would it be okay for me to reach out to you and see if you're available?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't say a whole lot about doctors, but by and large, they weren't what I wanted, what I needed. I've been told to go to the psychiatrist more than once.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I know that you have experiences. So maybe before we end, if I could ask you just one more quick question, and as far as doctors are concerned, I'm debating whether to ask you what were the positives or what were the negatives. Maybe I'll just leave it up to you to answer. What did doctors do that either that worked for you, that helped you, or what did they do that was unhelpful?
My mind goes towards the negative.
Okay.
But when when I was going back for annual checkups at the doctor's, they would schedule everybody for a Saturday, and we'd go and sit for 2 hours in a whole room of mothers with their children with polio. And of course, that doesn't happen now, but that was horrible. I hated it. I hated to go back to the doctor. Now, I'm losing my attention.
Okay, well, it's
I
been
think I
awesome.
just got tired about doctors.
Okay.
I haven't had an outstanding doctor. Oh, except one in Fort Wayne. There is a polio, there's a pain specialist who is a paraplegic from an accident, I think.
Mhm.
And his experience has made him very useful to all of us in the area.
Mhm.
Yeah, he uses a wheelchair.
Mhm. Okay.
So med students could use a wheelchair for a week, see how they get around.
Mhm. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I will definitely be in touch. And if
Okay.
anybody you know is interested in speaking with me, I'd love to talk with them as well.
Okay, I will contact those people.
And I'm going to stop the recording.